Hello. In this video, I just want to talk about uh, our viewpoints toward the world and to ourselves, and the changes that are needed and almost desperately needed at this current uh, point of time in our nation's history and our world history. And the previous viewpoints by former civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King, which is today's Martin Luther King Day, Malcolm X, Robert Kennedy, and other philosophers such as Jiddu Krishnamurti. And the points that they raised were dependent on the times. So that would be the mid 1960s, late 60s. It's almost 60 years ago, almost a lifetime for many. And the points that they raised then are imperative to how the world needed to change then. It is much different now, where I think those viewpoints need to be more radicalized. And when I talk about radicalization, people tend to define it as almost as if it was terrorism or an act of terrorism. Well, that's what the people in positions of power would want you to think, that radical changes and viewpoints are inherent on a type of differing violence. Well, that's not the case. When we talk about radical viewpoints, we're talking about breaking the mold of the everyday catechisms and constructs that allegedly define you, and they don't. And in this video, I'd like to talk about those issues. I think there are 3 points I'd like to raise. And the first point would be the views toward the world and how we view the world. Now, we allow others to speak for us. And this is the reason why we have a voting construct in place for elected officials who we help to elect to go and speak for us to other world leaders who they do the same, that they allow their systems of government and they allow their systems, their advocates within those systems of government to speak on behalf of them to us. And so I think this is one area that needs to change, because the people that we help vote for are not people that really represent us. In fact, the whole voting system of who to vote for us is not what's in question, but the people that we vote for are in question. The system of government needs a little bit of a tweak, in that it needs a bit of a change. But what really needs to change, what type of radical changes it needs, is the entities and influences, and whether it be individuals of an affluent background or corporations, major corporations, such as anybody in the banking industry, the fossil fuel industry, the gun industry, private military industry, foreign lobby industry. These are all the entities and affluent individuals who are being spoken for, not us, because they got the money and we don't. We're broke and we're independent upon the federal government to supply a pittance for us. So they really don't speak for us in terms of how we view the world and how the world views us. And that needs to change, because as you could see, that we are in a total state of war in the past almost 130 years now, going all the way back, even predating World War I, that we have been in a constant state of conflict at some point within this epoch of human history, in which destroys any type of hegemony in the region. Now, the one area that is a main concern right now would be the Middle East. But now it seems to have grown exponentially to Eurasia, or Soviet Union, China, North Korea. You know, these are countries that are major leaguers in trade, in export trade, and exportation of goods, importation of goods, as well as the financial currencies that drive these countries. And so we have a lot of these entities that basically go to our political leaders and speak for us, even though they don't speak for us, they speak for themselves. And so what we need to do is change this change this with a radical, uh, a change of this radical type of thinking that they have. Remember, their viewpoints and their change and their thoughts are radical in that they are the ones creating division. They're the ones creating conflict. They're the ones creating war. If you ask most Americans what they think, they wouldn't want anything to do with Syria, for example. Why are we having boots on the ground in Syria at this point? We're helping to destroy a country by supporting terrorists to overthrow a democratically elected government. Is that an American position or is that an institutionalized position? Well, I would think that the people that we help vote for or the people that influence our governments with money and power are the ones being spoken for, not us, because that wouldn't be happening, right? So that's what needs to change. We need to change that whole paradigm within the political system and who influences our systems. Now, that would mean that we have to stop voting. And for you to have a short-term memory loss every 4 years regarding, things are going to change this time around if we just vote for Joe Biden. Oh, we don't want Donald Trump in office, so we'll vote for Joe Biden. And now the people are saying, oh, Joe Biden really didn't work out. We need to vote for somebody on the Republican side. They'll ask for change. And they'll give you promises of change here and there. And every 4 years, you fall for it. And in fact, you fall for it every so often that these people now have it down to a craft, an expertise craft. These are expert liars. They're nothing more. They're pimps and profiteers that cater to you, the ignorant public, in hoping to keep voting for them. Because when you keep voting for these people, you keep them in power. It's a repetitious problem. And it happens every quarter decade. So what we need to do is change all this. Well, how do we do that? Well, that's a good question. How do we make those changes? But they can change, but it has to be up to us. The geostrategic and hegemony in the world, and this is something that is very imperative because this leads to war and conflict. We need better political systems in place to speak for us. And when I talk about this, voting for a Republican or a Democrat isn't going to create hegemony in the region. Now, there is a political entity that could be beneficial to humanity, and that is the libertarian system. But right now, they're going through a very troubling time in that there's turmoil within the group. And it seems to be that it's led by differing of factions. I don't want to speak too much about the libertarian issue because I'm very new to it and trying to understand what they're about currently. So what you see on Twitter or on other viral media isn't representative of the whole, but it is a troubling issue when you do have many people that do cater to libertarian issues, and they do have these minuscule problems. And it's not a problem that the Republicans or Democrats have. They have much bigger problems at hand. And their problems stem from the fact that, like I said before, that they are led by a number of different agencies and individuals that cater to the points and views of those specific entities and agendas. And they don't cater to the voting bloc unless you have money. And if you have money and you donate to the cause, then maybe they'll listen to you. But other than that, you know, how could it be that one person, the president of the United States, listens to 330 million people? It's impossible. It can't be done. So we need a new, better political system that speaks on behalf of us to have a better hegemony and better geostrategies, political strategies that are happening not just in the country, but abroad. More importantly, abroad, because what's happening abroad is happening in our name. And when these people, these draconian oligarchs that represent us in the Democratic and Republican parties, they're basically saying that we're doing this for the American people. Well, they're speaking on behalf of us, and that's right. We're the ones that voted for them. The people who vote for these Democrats and Republicans, I'm speaking to you because you're the ones who vote in these problems. Now, if you stop voting and you stop looking at each other through a left and right paradigm, and that's something I'm going to speak on next, the definitions that we adhere to. These are the problems that we face. And the problems that we face is how we look at each other. And I'm going to speak on that in a minute. But we have to start looking inward to make the changes outward, because we can't make any changes outward if we don't make the changes inward. And these people are going to continue to speak on our behalf and create the problems in our behalf, on our behalf, abroad. And, you know, these countries such as Iraq and Afghanistan, Syria and Libya, they're looking at us. And even though we didn't create these problems, we helped facilitate it by voting for these people who act on our behalf. And meanwhile, are they telling us through the legacy media about the problems that are happening abroad, much less happening in our own backyard? Of course not. They're giving you news that doesn't pertain to the betterment of the whole. And they'll throw sports at you, and they'll throw meaningless, transparent entertainment, whether it be reality TV or Kim Kardashian, or Tom Brady, or what's happening in Yankee Stadium. All this is trivial because none of this is actually important enough where the betterment of humanity caters to. It caters to the Romans, where the politics would throw bread and circuses at these people in hopes of forgetting about the problems that are happening inside their government in which they vote for. And it comes to the next point, the final point I'm trying to make is our independent definitions of how we define ourselves. And what do we define ourselves with? We define ourselves with human constructs, transparent, meaningless isms, whether it be political, whether it be politics, religion, racism, sexism, all the isms that are basically human constructs. These are man-made. And when I say that, you know, religion is man-made, I'm not saying spirituality is a definition of religion. Spirituality and religion are totally different entities altogether. Whereas religion is basically seclusive and spirituality is inclusive of everybody. The definition of God rely on whether it be Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, all the monotheisms are basically not inclusive of everybody. Now, they may say that they accept everybody, but their particular divides or their particular rule sets within those specific religions are different from one another. So that means that it doesn't cater to the whole unless you're of that particular religion. So that's the definition I'm trying to separate. And we don't need, when I say racism, it's different than culture, right? Racism is seclusive of people. And it also is irrelevant. I mean, if you're going to go by the definition of what constructs you as your, the color of your skin, for example, which is transparent. I mean, that doesn't define you. If that defines you, then you're nothing more than a mere temporary shell. But you're much bigger than that, because what is in the mind? The mind is what defines you, not your skin tone or the color of your skin tone. But that's what the people in positions of power would want you to be defined as. They want you to be divided amongst each other so that you'll always be warring with each other. And what they fear is unity. Because when it comes to unity, comes power, real power. And that's what defines you. And what defines you is outside of the constructs. Once you understand that much, then you can make the radical changes from within, and then you can make the changes outwardly, because you can't make a change outwardly without making the change inwardly, because the problems stem from the self, yourself. And once you think, and once you start realizing that you're much bigger than what is defined for you, and these definitions are defining us, unfortunately, and we need a breakthrough, a real radical change. That's why I talk about radical changes, not through violence, but through the enlightenment of the individual. And then when that breakthrough happens, then that light can spread to others, and that they can realize, well, the world that we know, that we're accustomed to, is not the real world that we're perceiving, but it was perceived for us. It's told by others, and they are the people in positions of power. They don't have the same problems as we do. They don't have the everyday problems such as bill payments or a late on rent payments, when I'm going to get my next meal. What about shelter and food? And there's a lot of homeless people, a lot of people that are going through financial hardships. But if you're a millionaire, you don't have these problems. And they would like you to think that they're a part of you, that they share the same problems as you. They don't. And they live in their seclusive mansions far away from the public. And they don't have the same problems as we do when we live on top of each other, if we live amongst others at all. There are millions and millions of people that don't live at all. They don't have a house. Poverty is a real thing. But we need to make the necessary changes and break out the human constructs that define us. Because if we don't, and we don't make that change from within, we can't make the change on an outward basis. And that's where the problems really arise from, because the problems that are outwardly are coming from the people that we help elect, that are creating the problems for us in our name. And we can't do anything about it unless we change. And we got to change how we see each other. And we can't see each other through a construct, a human construct. I don't see you as a specific religion or a race or a political ideology. All that doesn't matter. And we have to break out of those chains, because if we don't, the problems will continue to exasperate, and it'll come at a time where we can't make those changes at all.